Hi, my name is Shelbi Eggers, and this is my hope story. So, growing up, I was always in church. My parents were both teachers within the church. We were always there, and I considered my church my second home. When it comes to my relationship with God, I loved God with an intensity. I wanted to do everything for God. I wanted to do everything that had to do with God. I wanted to learn all I could, and it led me to giving my life to Christ at Lakeview Camp at the age of 8. The following year after camp, my cousin assaulted me. And when that happened, after it had finished, I was lost. I didn't understand what had happened. I didn't know what was happening. All I knew is that it was bad. And I remember laying next to one of my other cousins, and I began to cry, and she rolled over and she told me to shut up. And in that moment, something broke really deep down inside of me. And I took her words quite literal. I told myself that I wouldn't be able to ever tell anybody that this happened. So I chose to live with it, and I went on survival mode anytime I was around him and went along with everything. So he continued to assault me from the age of 9 to 14, whenever it finally stopped, whenever I told him I had a boyfriend. When I got my boyfriend at the age of 14, I thought he was going to solve all my issues. I thought he had caused my cousin to stop assaulting me, so maybe this is the guy. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. He considered my no's as just words to be taken and forced into yeses. And after enough time, I just said yes to everything. Even when it came to my virginity, he continued to tell me that I was his wife. At the age of 15, he kept telling me that I was going to be his wife, so it doesn't matter. And eventually, I gave him my virginity, and that broke me. That was not something that I wanted to give up, and now that I did, it had opened a door to where now I was addicted to anything sexual, and I finally was able to get some relief whenever I walked away from that relationship. And at that point, my relationship with God, I still loved him, but I no longer thought I was worthy of his love. I no longer thought that I was a Christian because I was putting on this mask of this happy Christian girl, but living a completely sinful life. So I took a year to focus on myself. It was my senior year. I decided to focus on myself and trying to repair my relationship with God. And whenever that happened, I drew closer. That's when Satan attacks you the hardest, is whenever you start to draw closer to God. In March of 2015, my youth group got into a horrible accident on the way to fine arts, and it resulted in the death of someone who I considered a mother. Whenever I got the phone call about it, I couldn't understand why God did this. Why did God take somebody who was touching people's lives, leading them to Christ? Why wasn't I in that seat where she was sitting? Because where she sat is where I always sat. And I was originally supposed to be on that trip. I questioned God and his love for everyone. If he loved us so much, why in the world would he cause this to happen? Eventually, I worked through that anger, but there was a level of mistrust now in God and not trusting him fully in what he says he is. So as the time goes by, I am not really acknowledging all the abuse that had happened in previous years. I'm just kind of going through the motions. Looking back on it now, I was the lukewarm Christian. I was checking off all the boxes, but my relationship truly with God was not really there. I would pray and I would ask him to forgive my sins, and that was it. In 2016, I began to come to terms with everything that had happened, and I had started dating my now husband, and he had told me that I had some issues. I needed to talk to somebody and get some help. So I started to get help, but that help did not help. It just made matters a whole lot worse. So I ended up leaving therapy. And I got prayer over the situation, and I figured, you know what? I gave it to God, so I should be healed. Only I didn't truly give it to God. I said it out loud, but I didn't truly give anything to God. Therefore, I was still walking with that baggage. In 2017, I moved to Abilene, and I ended up getting a friend group that consisted of me, my roommate, and 2 other guys. We did everything together, and then one of the guys proceeded to tell me how much he liked me and wanted to date me, and I told him I couldn't. I wasn't ready for a relationship. I did not want a relationship. And then I opened up to him the fact that he looked exactly like my cousin. And that was just not a barrier that I really wanted to cross. And he told me, he said, you know what? I'm never going to hurt you. I'm never going to do those things. I'm never going to betray your trust. Only he did that exact thing. One night, I don't remember much about it. All I remember is that I felt very out of it. And I remember him taking me to my room while our friends were in the next room setting up the Christmas tree, and he proceeded to assault me the exact same way my cousin did. When I woke up later that night, everything hit me, not just from that situation, but from everything that happened with my cousin, everything that happened with my boyfriend. And it hit me, and I felt the shame that I had been carrying was magnified. The guilt that I was carrying was magnified as well. And I began losing myself slowly. In 2018, May of 2018, I married my husband, and he began to kind of push me to get help because he was noticing that I wasn't handling things well. I wasn't truly living. I was going through the emotions of everything. I decided to go to Noah Project to get help because I couldn't keep going the way I was going. I couldn't keep ignoring everything that had happened to me and thinking that it would go away if I didn't acknowledge it. So I went to Noah Project and I got the help that I need, and I started getting stronger. I started getting confident. My therapist actually helped me start getting closer to God and speaking life into me instead of just prescribing me things. I decided to start an investigation on my friend that had assaulted me. And they had told me that it was going to be hard, and I was very naive in how hard it was going to be. I proceeded to have to relive in great detail that night over and over and over again. I would have to tell them so many things, and that only brought on heightened anxiety. My depression skyrocketed, and night terrors started happening to where I wasn't sleeping because I didn't want to sleep, because I didn't want to have to dream the dreams that plagued my nights. It had gotten to the point where it was consuming my life. I was no longer living. I was just existing. I felt like a shell of a person. On November 15th, 2018, I decided to end my life. I wanted to put an end to all the pain, all the hurt, and all the shame. I went into my closet and I proceeded to hang myself. And as I am hanging there, I'm looking at a doorknob on a jewelry cabinet, and I'm watching it go black all around, and then all of a sudden I feel the door begin to shake. And it wasn't just like a little light vibration. It felt like there was somebody on the other side beating the door down, trying to get in. But there was no one there. And then after the door stopped shaking, the faces of my husband, mom, and dad flashed before my eyes. And I realized what I was doing, and I stopped it. Whenever I looked at myself in the mirror and could see the repercussions of what I had just done, shame and guilt took over me. There was no way I was going to be loved for doing this. It was a selfish thing. No one's going to love me after this. But God showed me that I was wrong in the actions of the next 24 hours. I told my husband what happened, and he fought for me. He told me that he still loved me, and he was going to fight for me and protect me, even if it meant for myself. The next day, November 16th, there was a group of girls from New Hope that were getting together at Cassie Moon's house, and we were going to hang out and we were going to pray. And I told Nathan I didn't want to go. After what had just happened, I had too much shame. And Nathan told me, he said, "You need to go. It may be good for you." So I go, and I don't talk to anybody. And we decided to, during that time, it was when California was on fire, and we began to pray for California. And then Michelle Velas started praying, and then she stopped. And she said, "God, there's someone here who feels like the woman with eternal bleeding." And as soon as she said those words, I knew God was trying to reach me, because after my friend had assaulted me, I felt like the woman with eternal bleeding, that if only I could just touch Jesus's robes, I would be healed. But I didn't tell anybody that, because it also meant having to acknowledge why I felt like that. So whenever she said that, God reached to me in that moment, and he spoke to me, saying that he heard my tears, he saw my tears, and he knew what I was going through. That moment, I started to get closer to God. I started to entertain letting him in and letting him have control over my life. But I needed control, because so many times I didn't have control, and it got me hurt. So if I had control over situations, I was going to stay safe. So from 2018 to 2022, I maintained letting God have little pieces of my life. Not all, but just little bitty pieces. I was 39 weeks pregnant when I received a positive diagnosis of COVID. We notified the hospital, and the hospital said that there's going to be precautions. My husband will not be allowed in the room with me and during labor. I will not be allowed to hold or see my baby, and I will be going to the COVID unit, and I will be by myself. And we fought it, and they came back with saying, "If you continue to push this, we will be taking your baby from you." So in that moment, I realized I had no control. I tried to control the situation and get them to bend to my will, and it wasn't happening. So in my bathroom, I got down on my knees and I prayed. I said, "God, I can't do this. Please just let me have a healthy baby and let me not be alone." When they did eventually say that we could have 30 minutes of time with our son Elliot, we got 3.5 hours of skin to skin with our son before they were able to take him away. Nathan was able to be with me during labor, so I wasn't alone in labor. And whenever I left the labor and delivery room in which the COVID unit, I wasn't alone there, because God was with me. God gave me a peace and a joy, even though I was alone in a room after having a kind of traumatic birth. I was able to be joyful, to where the nurses even noticed, like, "I don't understand how you can be so happy given what just happened. It's just because of God." So after that moment, I began to give God a little bit more of my life. I would give him more pieces. And then in August of 2022, I received a phone call saying my cousin had tragically passed away in a car accident. And that phone call brought me and my world crashing down, because my cousin was only 18. She was about to start college, and she was touching people's lives and leading them to God in ways that I never could. I became angry with God. I questioned him. If he loved us so much, then why in the world would he take Rachel from this earth? For months, I put on this facade of I had everything together and I'm fine, when in deep down I was angry. And I don't want to say I hated God, but I was as close as you could get. I finally had enough. I had reached my breaking point. I couldn't live with what I was doing. I was reacting out of anger towards my loved ones. The way I spoke, the way I reacted to things, and I couldn't take it. So finally I went up for prayer and I asked Pastor Barb for help. And she began to pray over me, and a door opened within inside me during that prayer. That night I went home and I let God have it. I screamed at him. I yelled at him. I told him how much I hated him. And then when I had it all out, I asked him to take it from me, because I don't want it anymore. I said, I give you complete control. I can't do this. And in that moment, he said, be still and rest. And so I did. I released control in every area of my life, and I walked away from a lot of things that I was volunteering in, and I rested, and I spent time with him, and God moved in such a miraculous way in that moment. He began to heal me. When I relinquished control over my marriage and my husband, God moved to where my husband accepted God as his Savior. He got saved February of 23. In June of 23, he took suicidal thoughts from me completely. I no longer, after that day, I did not have any feelings of taking my life. And if they tried to pop up, I knew it was just Satan. It wasn't me. It wasn't true. It was lies that Satan was trying to feed me. So I would tell him to leave, because I was God's daughter and I was protected. Then in 2023, I had my final baby. After that, I got lost in postpartum depression, and in that moment of being lost, it also opened the door of questioning, why am I the way I am? Everyone kept telling me that I'm so hard on myself, but I couldn't understand why. So I began to take it to God. God, help me. I want to understand what's going on. Why am I the way I am? And I started this at the beginning of the year, and then in September of 24, I went to Freedom as a photographer, thinking that God won't talk to me because I'm not a participant. God talked to me and freed me of so much. He revealed to me that I had a lot of self-hatred for my past and self-condemnation, that I used to think that no matter what I did, I was going to hell. I could do everything right, but I was still going to hell for my past. But God told me that I'm made new in him. Whenever I relinquished control over my entire life, I was given a new identity. I was made completely whole, and I'm now walking in a peace that I have never felt before. A peace within myself, because I know who I am now. And God has also healed me of fear. I, for so long, wanted to run from Abilene because it was a place of pain. But now God has changed a place of pain into a place of unity, family, growth, and healing. God freed me from anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, sexual sin, and the need for control. He freed me from all those things and gave me joy and peace and love and comfort and a family through new hope. Someone once told me that transparency gives Satan less of a hold over your life. So when we're transparent with everything that we're struggling through, Satan can't use it against you. I'm Shelby, and this is my hope story.